Welcome to Dark Whispers. Do you love mystery and horror stories that transport you to unknown realms and keep you on the edge of your seat? If you're a fan of suspense and thrill, our channel is the perfect place for you. We bring you real stories and others inspired by the depths of dark imagination, taking you on thrilling journeys through abandoned alleys, haunted houses, and inexplicable mysterious events. Don't miss the chance to join us now. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to be the first to uncover the secrets of Dark Whispers. We promise moments of suspense and terror that will stay with you for a long time. Dark Whispers, where darkness whispers the scariest tales. 1. The shadow in the alley. Adam had always been cautious about walking alone at night, especially in unfamiliar parts of the city. But this wasn't unfamiliar. This was his neighborhood, and he had walked these streets countless times. However, he'd never taken the alley that cut through the block. It was infamous for its eerie silence and unsettling reputation. People whispered about it, but Adam always dismissed such stories as urban legends. That night, the streetlights flickered as he approached the alley. It was late, and he was tired. The shortcut would save him 10 minutes, so he decided to take it. As he stepped in, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature seemed to drop, and the sounds of the city faded, replaced by an oppressive silence. Halfway through, Adam started to feel uneasy. He glanced over his shoulder, expecting to see someone following him, but the alley was empty. He quickened his pace, but the feeling only grew stronger. Then faint footsteps echoed behind him. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling. The footsteps stopped. He turned around again, and for a moment, there was nothing. Then emerging from the shadows, a figure took shape. It was tall, unnaturally so, with arms that hung almost to the ground. Its face was obscured by darkness, but its glowing eyes locked onto Adam's. Frozen in terror, Adam could only watch as the figure moved closer. It didn't walk. It glided, silent and menacing. Suddenly, adrenaline took over, and he ran. He didn't look back, even when he heard a guttural growl echo through the alley. When he burst onto the main street, the noise and light of the city felt like salvation. Later, he told a friend about the incident. They laughed nervously and said, "No one uses that alley anymore. People say it's cursed. Something about the shadows of those who died there never leaving." From that night on, Adam avoided the alley, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching him from the darkness. 2. The red balloon. Sarah loved her evening walks home through the vibrant city streets. Vendors called out their wares, performers entertained small crowds, and the glow of neon signs gave the night a lively charm. But one night, everything felt off. The street was unusually quiet, and the usual bustle was replaced with an eerie stillness. As Sarah walked, she noticed something strange. A red balloon tied to a lamppost. Its string swayed gently, though there was no wind. Curious, she approached it and saw a note attached to the string. It read, "Follow me." Sarah chuckled nervously, thinking it was some kind of prank. But as she looked ahead, she spotted another red balloon tied to a signpost a few blocks away. Against her better judgment, she followed it. When she reached the second balloon, it had another note. Almost there. The trail of balloons led her farther from the bustling main street into a quieter part of the city. The buildings here were older, their windows dark and empty. Finally, she reached the last balloon, tied to an old gate at the entrance to a narrow alley. The note read, "Look up." Her heart pounded as she slowly raised her head. On the rooftop of the building in front of her stood a figure in a clown mask. In his hand, he held a long knife. He didn't move, didn't say a word, just stood there, staring at her. Sarah's scream echoed down the empty alley as she turned and ran, not stopping until she reached a well-lit street. When she looked back, the alley was empty, the balloons gone. The next day, she told the story to a friend who looked at her in shock. "That's the same alley where people have been disappearing lately," they said. "No one knows who's doing it, but they always find a red balloon nearby." 3. The vanishing hitchhiker. Tom had been working as a rideshare driver for a few years and thought he'd seen it all. Late-night drunks, bizarre requests, and odd passengers were all part of the job. But nothing prepared him for what he experienced one rainy night on the outskirts of the city. It was close to midnight, and the rain was coming down hard, reducing visibility to almost nothing. As he drove along a deserted road, his headlights illuminated a figure standing by the roadside. It was a young woman in a pale dress, drenched and shivering. Feeling sorry for her, Tom pulled over and rolled down the window. "Do you need a ride?" he asked. The woman nodded silently and got into the back seat. She didn't say much, only giving him an address in the old part of town. Her voice was soft and barely audible, and she seemed distant, staring out of the window as if lost in thought. Tom tried to make small talk, asking where she was coming from, but she didn't respond. The atmosphere in the car grew heavier, and a chill filled the air. When they arrived at the address, Tom turned to let her know they'd reached her destination. But when he looked at the back seat, it was empty. The woman was gone. Shaken, Tom got out of the car and knocked on the door of the house. An elderly woman answered. When Tom explained what had happened, her face turned pale. "That's my daughter," she said, her voice trembling. "She died in an accident on that road 10 years ago. She was trying to get home." Tom felt a cold shiver run down his spine. When he returned to his car, he noticed the back seat was soaking wet, though there was no sign of the woman. Was the man under the streetlight? Samir had always enjoyed his nighttime walks through his neighborhood. The streets were usually peaceful, the air cool, and the streetlights cast a warm glow that made the quiet hours feel safe. But one night, everything changed. It was just past midnight when Samir decided to take his usual route after a long day at work. The streets were eerily quiet, and the usual hum of distant traffic seemed absent. He shrugged it off, thinking it was just a slow night. As he walked down a long, straight street, something unusual caught his eye. Under a streetlight far ahead, a man was standing perfectly still. He wasn't moving or leaning, just standing upright, facing in Samir's direction. Samir slowed his pace, unsure of what to make of it. The man was tall and wore a dark coat, but from the distance his face was obscured by shadow. Samir told himself it was nothing. Maybe the man was waiting for someone, or just lost in thought. But as Samir got closer, unease began to creep in. The man hadn't moved at all, not even a shift in weight or a turn of the head. He just stood there, like a statue under the pale yellow light. Samir decided to cross the street, hoping to avoid any awkward interaction. As he stepped onto the other side of the road, he glanced back and froze. The man had turned to face him. His heart started to race. He quickened his pace, pretending not to notice. When he glanced back again, the man was no longer under the streetlight. Samir stopped, looking around in confusion. The street was empty. He shook his head, laughing nervously. "I'm just tired," he muttered to himself. But as he turned a corner, he saw him again. The same man, standing under another streetlight farther down the road. This time, Samir's fear spiked. How had the man gotten there so quickly? It wasn't possible. Samir didn't wait to find out. He turned and started walking briskly in the opposite direction. The street was lined with small shops and closed cafes, their dark windows reflecting his anxious expression. As he walked, he glanced over his shoulder repeatedly. The man wasn't there. But then, just as he let his guard down, he spotted movement in the reflection of a shop window. The man was walking behind him, his pace slow but deliberate. Samir's breathing quickened and he broke into a jog. The sound of footsteps behind him echoed in the empty street. Samir didn't dare turn around. He ran as fast as he could, his heart pounding in his ears. Finally, he reached a main road with bright lights and passing cars. He stopped, panting, and looked back. The man was gone. For a moment, Samir stood there, catching his breath. He laughed nervously, feeling foolish for panicking. "It was probably just someone messing with me," he said aloud, trying to calm himself. But as he turned to continue walking, he saw him again. The man was standing under a streetlight on the opposite side of the road, watching him. Samir froze. The man slowly raised a hand and pointed directly at him. That was enough for Samir. He sprinted home, slamming the door behind him and locking it. For weeks after that night, Samir avoided walking at night. But sometimes when he looked out his window late at night, he thought he saw a figure standing under the streetlight outside his house, waiting.